We say welcome to 10 Tampa Bay Plus and your guide to election 2024. I'm Frank Wiley. So for the next 15 minutes, we're here to give you information to make an informed decision on your ballot and how to ensure your vote is counted. So we will look at Florida's 6 amendments and some of the big local issues at stake here. Plus, how back-to-back hurricanes impacted voting. And we will verify how you can make sure your mail-in ballot is sent to your elections office. I want to get you started, though, with the amendments because, as we mentioned, there are 6 of them. Here's some quick insight into what you'll be voting on. Amendment 1 would establish school board elections as partisan from the 2026 election cycle onward, if passed. It would allow political parties to nominate their own candidates for school board elections and would require candidates to run under a specific party affiliation. Voting yes on Amendment 1 would also mean supporting partisan school board elections. Voting no would support keeping elections nonpartisan and apolitical. Amendment 2 takes on the topic of fishing and hunting. If passed, it would make it a state constitutional right to hunt and fish. It would also make hunting and fishing the preferred way to control fish and wildlife populations. The amendment does not limit the FWC's authority. They are the ones who currently regulate fishing and hunting. Voting yes on Amendment 2 supports hunting and fishing as a constitutional right and makes them the preferred method of wildlife population control. Voting no means that the FWC's regulations stay the same. And if voters approve Amendment 3, people over the age of 21 will be able to possess, purchase, and use marijuana for personal, non-medical reasons as well. Current state law allows people over the age of 21 to buy marijuana if they have a medical card for marijuana. Amendment 3 also allows existing medical dispensaries to sell and distribute that product. Voting yes on Amendment 3 would support the use of recreational marijuana in Florida. Voting no would only allow the continued use of medical marijuana. If passed, Florida would become the 25th state to legalize recreational marijuana. Amendment 4, if passed, would legalize abortion up to the period of fetal viability, which is around 24 weeks, or when a healthcare provider deems it necessary for the health and safety of a mother. The amendment would overturn the current Heartbeat Protection Act, which bans almost all elective abortions after the 6-week mark. A yes vote on Amendment 4 supports legalizing abortions up to 24 weeks. A no vote supports keeping the current Heartbeat Protection Act banning abortions after 6 weeks. Amendment 5 would add an annual inflation adjustment to the homestead tax exemption that is currently capped at $25,000. Instead, the assessments would be adjusted for a percent change in the CPI. The amendment would not impact taxes that pay for schools. A yes vote on Amendment 5 supports the homestead tax exemption being adjusted for inflation, which, by the way, would be updated annually. A vote for no supports the tax current exemption law, capped at $25,000. And for Amendment 6, voters out there would get to decide whether public campaign funds should be available for those running for statewide office, or if candidates should no longer be able to spend taxpayer dollars in campaigning. It would also remove the current required spending limits and financial audits for campaigns. A yes vote supports the end of Florida's public campaign financing program. A no vote would keep that program in place. And Hillsborough voters, there are a few other big decisions for you to make. First, you'll have to vote on increasing property tax to help schools pay for expenses. The district says passing the referendum will add about $6,000 a year to each teacher's salary. Other school employees would get an additional $3,000 per year. Last July, county commissioners voted to push the referendum to the 2026 ballot. But the district says that delay would hurt the schools. A judge ultimately stepping in to allow the measure on this year's ballot. And the battle for Hillsborough County State Attorney will come to a head here because Governor-appointed Susie Lopez will now face off against ousted Andrew Warren. The two candidates recently took center stage in Brandon talking about the county's biggest issues. One question: how each candidate plans to address crime while balancing the need for criminal justice reform. Here's the response.
The job of the state attorney is not to be a social worker or a public defender. It's to put bad guys behind bars and keep our community safe.
Standing up for people's rights and exonerating the innocent. Aggressively prosecuting and investigating the guilty. Not taking no for an answer when it comes to delivering justice for victims' families.
Governor Ron DeSantis appointing Susie Lopez to the position in 2022 after he suspended Andrew Warren from the job over comments that he made about Florida's abortion ban. Warren is suing the governor over that move. Right now, the court battle is ongoing. Early voting is live in all of our area counties. Hours are from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening, really depending on where you live. Early voting ends November 3rd or the 4th. And 10 Tampa Bay's Eric Glasser talking with voters about their frequently asked questions.
Well, election officials tell me that they're expecting a good turnout for this year's presidential election. Lots of early signs of voter enthusiasm, and that includes people who couldn't wait to get out and cast their ballots on day one of early voting.
Lines weren't long, but they were steady at popular polling places today. Interest in this year's presidential race has already boosted projected voter turnout. Voters had various reasons for getting out here on day one. Some said that they were concerned about potential issues as Election Day approaches. Others said they are enthusiastic about their candidates. And some wanted to get voting behind them so they could concentrate on storm recovery.
It's second thought because I still want to get out today and get it done, get my vote in, and then I can worry about the business and get things back in shape.
You never know what the next day might bring. So I want to make sure my vote is there in case something happens. Don't leave it until the last minute.
This year's back-to-back hurricanes have also created election challenges, damage at some polling places, staffing enough trained poll workers, and getting ballots to those displaced by the storms. But election supervisors tell me an executive order from Governor Ron DeSantis loosening some election rules will give them the flexibility that they need to make sure that things go smoothly without sacrificing security.
Remember, during early voting, you can cast your ballot at any polling place in your county. That should help alleviate some of the concerns that folks have about whether their usual polling place has been impacted by the storms. For details about voting locations or vote by mail options, check the Supervisor of Elections website in your county. In Tampa, Eric Glasser, 10 Tampa Bay.
Also, remember to bring at least one form of ID to those polls out there. There could be your driver's license, U.S. passport, military ID as well. Your identification must include your signature and a photo. All right, you know our Verified team is here to stop the spread of misinformation. So viewers reached out to 10 Tampa Bay about how the postage works. So we're here to help you out. Want to verify. Will the Postal Service deliver ballots if they don't have enough postage? Our sources here, USPS, the National Conference of State Legislatures, and our local election officials. So here's a look at our local counties that require you to handle the postage. Sarasota, Manatee, Pasco, Hardy, Highlands, and Hernando counties. The other counties cover postage for voters as long as you mail it back through the U.S. Postal Service. And many ballots only need one first-class stamp, but if there's extra pages or a lot on the ballot there, making the envelope extra bulky, you'll likely need a second stamp if it weighs more than an ounce. But the USPS says it's not the end of the world if you get it wrong here, because your ballot will still be delivered to your elections office. It gets special handling through the mail. And we can verify, yes, the Postal Service will deliver ballots if they don't have enough postage. But election officials and your tax dollars will end up paying for the missing stamps there. So we also know the cost of stamps, it's not cheap. We've talked a lot about this. So to avoid cost, do this. Drop your ballot off free of charge at an early voting site. And our Verified team is also looking at claims from the candidates at the top of the ballot and their party's plans for the future. So we are talking about former President Donald Trump and, of course, Vice President Kamala Harris. So up next, the team looks into claims about the economy, immigration, Project 2025, and election rules. All right here on 10 Tampa Bay Plus.
Welcome to our special election edition of Verify This. I'm Brandon Lewis, and along with my co-host Adian Daytil and the rest of the Verified team, we're going to cover some of the biggest topics for voters this election cycle. On the economy, we break down what Vice President Kamala Harris's, quote, unrealized gains policy would mean for the average American, and which administration actually capped insulin costs.
I did that. I did the insulin.
We capped the price of insulin at $35 a month.
With illegal immigration a top issue for voters, we show you what measures are in place to keep undocumented citizens from voting in this election.
Plus,
They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
We traveled to Springfield, Ohio to find the origin of this false claim about Haitian migrants.
It appears to have started in a local Facebook group and then gained traction during an August 27th Springfield, Ohio commission meeting.
We also dig into Project 2025, the controversial initiative that outlines a political agenda for the next conservative president. We verify whether it calls for eliminating agencies like FEMA and answer your questions about what policy proposals the initiative actually does and doesn't recommend. And finally, we look into what election rules candidates have to abide by, like whether campaign ads actually have to be truthful.
Join us for the next 30 minutes as we cover these questions and much more in our special election episode of Verify This. First up, the economy. We've received lots of questions about Vice President Kamala Harris supporting a tax on unrealized gains. Some have claimed the policy would force average Americans to pay taxes on the increase of their home's value, even if they don't sell their home. Let's bring in Casey Decker to see how this proposal would affect you. Casey, let's start by explaining what unrealized gains are.
Yeah, it's the increase of an asset's value since you acquired it, like your home. If you purchased it for $200K and it's now worth $300K, that's an unrealized gain of $100K. Once you sell the asset, the gain becomes realized, and that's when you typically get taxed.
So what is Harris proposing? Because there are a lot of people posting on social media that her plan would force people to pay taxes on the increase in value of the home they're living in, even if they don't sell their home.
Almost all Americans don't have anything to worry about. Her plan only applies to the ultra rich, people with a net worth of at least $100 million. They would have to pay a 25% tax on each year's increase in their wealth.
So for perspective, how many people are we talking that would be impacted here?
We're talking about the wealthiest 0.01% of Americans, so less than 10,000 people. For the vast majority of Americans, this tax wouldn't affect them.
Casey, thanks so much for clearing that up for us. Let's turn now to one of Trump's proposals. You've heard him speak often about adding tariffs to goods that are made outside of the United States, especially China. Several of you asked what that could mean for prices on everyday items, so we reached out to economists to help explain. During the presidential debate, the candidates discussed Donald Trump's plan to increase tariffs on imported goods. He's proposing a 60% tariff on items imported from China and a 10 to 20% for all other countries. Trump claimed his proposal won't affect the price you pay at the store, but Kamala Harris said it would.
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years.
Several Verify viewers asked if Trump's plan would raise costs for Americans. So let's verify. Our sources are the Council on Foreign Relations, the Tax Foundation, the American Action Forum, and the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Tariffs are taxes that the government imposes on imported goods. Here's how they work. Let's say an American store buys shirts for $10 in Vietnam and sells them for $12 in the US. Under Trump's proposed tariff, the business would pay an additional $1 or $2 to import the shirts. While the importer could absorb the cost, economists say it's more likely the business will sell the shirts for up to $14, passing the cost on to the consumer. Estimates by policy experts vary, but Trump's tariff proposals are generally expected to cost a typical household between $1,700 and $6,000 annually. So, yes, Trump's proposed tariffs would likely raise costs for Americans. Joe Biden faced similar criticism earlier this year from fellow Democrats when he imposed increased tariffs on some Chinese goods, including solar panels and electric vehicles. We've all seen the cost of everything go up, and medical expenses and prescription drug prices are no exception. Both Harris and Trump say they're trying to help seniors save money by capping the cost of insulin at $35.
I did that. I did the insulin.
We capped the price of insulin at $35 a month.
Viewers Debbie and Marianne asked us who really deserves the credit. We checked with these sources, and here's what we found. In 2020, Trump signed an executive order that implemented a 2-year cap on the cost of insulin at $35. The cap applied to around 800,000 seniors who pay for optional Medicare Part D coverage. 2 years later, Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, which made Trump's cap permanent and expanded it to include nearly 2 million additional seniors who are enrolled in Medicare Part B coverage. So while Trump's cap was first, Biden expanded it to cover more seniors. Another hot topic this campaign season is immigration. Many Republicans say Harris is President Biden's border czar and imply that she's in charge of security and immigration policy at the southern border and largely responsible for the recent influx of migrants. We checked with these sources, including the White House's original root causes strategy from 2021, and found claims that Harris served as Biden's border czar, overseeing security at the border, are misleading. Harris was tasked by President Biden with addressing the root causes of migration from 3 Central American countries, none of which border the U.S. She led a diplomatic effort in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras to create job opportunities, support education, and combat human trafficking. This is not the same thing as overseeing security at the border, which is the job of Homeland Security. And it's difficult to quantify whether her efforts actually made a difference in curbing the number of people coming to the U.S. from these countries. Another question that dozens of you reached out about is whether undocumented people in the U.S. are casting ballots in this year's election. So we asked Ariane Daytil to explain how states prevent non-citizens from voting in federal elections.
Border security and immigration have been among the most talked about issues in the lead up to the presidential election, and some have linked those issues to voting, including former President Donald Trump, who said that Democrats want to sign undocumented immigrants up to vote.
Our elections are bad, and a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote.
Verify has received dozens of questions asking how states stop undocumented people and other non-citizens from voting in federal elections. Using these sources, here's what we can verify. Under U.S. law, U.S. citizens are the only people permitted to vote in federal elections, which include elections for president and Congress. When a person registers to vote, federal law mandates they sign a form attesting to their citizenship under penalty of perjury. Anyone violating the law could face a fine, up to 1 year in prison, and deportation, plus the penalties of whatever state crimes they violated. State departments of motor vehicles typically offer people the option to register or automatically register people to vote when they get a driver's license. A number of states allow non-citizens to obtain IDs issued by their DMV, but they have systems in place so those people are not also automatically registered to vote at the same time. Still, if somehow an undocumented person does end up registering to vote, there are other checkpoints to prevent them from casting a ballot. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993 requires states to routinely check their voter registration rolls for accuracy against various databases, including Social Security and felony records. So, if someone on their voter rolls doesn't have a Social Security number or they've committed a felony, they'd be taken off the rolls. And on Election Day, states have more protections against illegal voting. One of the more common practices is having a voter prove their identity and citizenship status at the polls by requiring an ID. Non-citizen IDs look different. In Illinois, for example, non-citizen driver's licenses say federal limits apply. Another safeguard available in some states on Election Day is the ability to challenge individual voters. Depending on the state, the challenged voter may have to verify their information, and their ballot may then be set aside for additional review. Data doesn't back up claims of widespread voting by undocumented immigrants. The Brennan Center for Justice analyzed 23.5 million votes from the 2016 election and only found 30 instances of non-citizens voting. And the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank, identified 129 proven incidents of non-citizens registering to vote or casting a ballot in the last 21 years. With your Verify, I'm Ariane Daytil.
One of the most viral claims of the year came during the presidential debate when Trump said Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, were killing and eating pets.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
We checked with these sources and confirmed there is no evidence that this is happening. So where did this rumor come from? We sent Verify reporter Colin Dorsey to Springfield to find out.
Karen Graves, a spokesperson for the city, told Verify there have been no credible reports or specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community. Rose Tamar Joseph, operations manager for the Haitian Support Center in Springfield, confirms.
All of those rumors that we knew about it, like they just saw it on the social media. That's how we knew about it also.
So you're saying there's no truth to the claims?
No.
So we can verify that there is no evidence to support these viral claims. So Where did it stem from? It appears to have started in a local Facebook group and then gained traction during an August 27th Springfield, Ohio commission meeting when a man who describes himself as a social media influencer brought up the claim without any evidence. With your Verify in Springfield, Ohio, I'm Colin Dorsey.
We're digging into a topic that touches nearly every major talking point of the presidential election, Project 2025, an initiative launched by the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank that outlines policies Heritage wants the next conservative president to enact. But what does Project 2025 really recommend? And is former President Donald Trump involved? We have team coverage to answer your questions about the scope of Project 2025. Let's start with Casey Decker to break down the key points you need to know about Project 2025.
It's quickly become one of the most talked about issues of the presidential election.
The Project 2025 plan is not a game.
Project 2025 has been going pretty viral.
Reproductive 900-page blueprint.
Our nation's sovereignty.
Look into Project 2025.
But just what is Project 2025? The Verify team is here to answer some of your questions using these sources. First, some basics. Project 2025 is an extensive proposal to quickly enact dozens of conservative policy goals in the event Trump wins the 2024 election. The proposal is more than 900 pages long, addresses nearly every major issue from abortion to education, and is extremely detailed about how policies should be enacted, sometimes down to the exact wording of proposed executive orders. It was launched by a right-wing think tank called the Heritage Foundation, with support from many other conservative groups. But does it have the support of Donald Trump? Not directly. In a post on Truth Social, Trump explicitly distanced himself from the project. Quote, "Some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal." But the majority of the project's authors are former Trump staffers, and many of the policy goals stated in the document overlap with those in Trump's own document called Agenda 47. The Heritage Foundation has led similar projects before, releasing detailed policy proposals for Republican presidents dating back to Reagan. So, why is Project 2025 getting so much more attention than their previous plans? A big reason, a bold new tactic the authors propose to more quickly accomplish their goals if Trump wins. The authors argue that in Trump's first term, he didn't enact as many conservative policies as he wanted because federal employees worked against him or generally slowed his progress. So the plan proposes to fundamentally change the way parts of the federal government are run. Federal agencies are led by political appointees, people handpicked by the president. But the agencies are staffed by civil servants, millions of subject matter experts who can only be hired or fired based on merit, according to a long-standing federal law. Civil servants stay in their roles as presidents come and go, assuring that agencies from the FBI to the CDC don't have to be built from scratch every 4 years. But just before he left office, Trump signed an executive order that tried to reclassify tens of thousands of civil servants as political appointees to make them easier to fire. The order was challenged in court, but Biden was elected and repealed it before those cases were settled or the order could take effect. A central tenet of Project 2025, bringing that order back. The authors say they're working on a conservative LinkedIn, a database of potential workers who Trump could immediately hire to replace career civil servants and who would be more eager to enact and enforce his agenda. But it's unclear how easy that would be for Trump to do logistically and legally. Which brings us to our next question. Can all the policies be enacted on day one? No. Many of these proposals would require an act of Congress. That makes a lot of them pretty much impossible unless Republicans also win a majority in the House and a supermajority in the Senate.
Thanks, Casey. In the wake of Hurricanes Helene and Milton, we have received many questions about how Project 2025 could affect various government agencies that handle natural disasters, including FEMA, which provides funding for disaster recovery and relief. Verify's Brandon Lewis looks into claims that Project 2025 would eliminate the agency.
We read through Project 2025 and found it doesn't call for eliminating FEMA, but it does call for big changes in how the federal government distributes relief funds. Today, local and state governments respond to disasters first. If they get overwhelmed, the governor can ask the president to declare a federal disaster, which triggers help from FEMA. Typically, the federal government pays for 75% of disaster-related expenses, and local governments pay 25%. although the federal share can be higher during severe events. Project 2025 recommends flipping the arrangement, so the federal government pays 25% and local governments pay 75%, although it would allow the feds to pay more during major incidents. The authors argue their plan would incentivize state and local governments to be more proactive in preparing for disasters. So, no, Project 2025 doesn't recommend eliminating FEMA, but it would put more of the financial burden of disaster recovery on state and local governments.
Women's reproductive rights are one of the key topics pushing people to the polls this November. During the vice presidential debate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz claimed that Project 2025 would mandate a pregnancy registry. Casey Decker looked into what Project 2025 really says.
Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies.
This claim is false. Project 2025 wouldn't require parents to actively register pregnancies. Instead, it would require states to submit data about abortions, miscarriages, and stillbirths after they happen. Currently, some states voluntarily report some of this data to the CDC. And while Vance has connections to the authors of Project 2025, the campaign has repeatedly distanced itself from it. With your Verified, I'm Casey Decker.
So what are some things Project 2025 does call for? Cuts to Medicaid, eliminating the Department of Education, the Head Start program, and the Department of Homeland Security, and reenacting Trump-era policies regarding border enforcement. Campaign ads are dominating the airwaves right now, and some make pretty outlandish claims about the candidates. Several Verified viewers emailed asking if political ads have to be factually accurate. Using these sources, we looked into whether politicians are actually required to tell the truth in their ads. Here's Brendan Lewis.
The rules for political ads are very different than typical consumer products, and we want to be clear up front that the answer to this question is no. Political ads are not required to be factual in order to be aired on broadcast television. In fact, the law allows politicians to say almost whatever they want in a commercial. This is because political ads are regulated by the FCC, which applies just two rules. One is that all candidates have the same opportunity to buy commercial time on stations. And two is that politicians can say whatever they want. Accuracy is not one of the rules, although TV stations could run a disclaimer explaining the rules before airing an ad. The only consequence for politicians who produce misleading or false ads is in court, and that's only if they defame someone, which is rare and hard to prove.
I think the rationale behind it is what? The idea of saying that candidates get to say what they want, and what? The voters get to sort of, through the marketplace of ideas, decide what's true, what's false.
That marketplace could also include news stories or fact checks like Verify stories explaining what's true and false.
Sometimes you might see a lot more ads from one candidate than you see from their opponent. This raises a question that a lot of people have during the election season. Aren't candidates guaranteed equal amounts of airtime? Casey Decker joins us to discuss what the rules really are. Hey Casey, so what are the rules when it comes to giving equal time to candidates on TV?
Well, the Communications Act says that if a candidate gets airtime on a station, that station, quote, shall afford equal opportunities to all other such candidates for that office. In general, that means if a candidate appears on air for more than 4 seconds, their opponent must be given an opportunity to appear as well. But there are some big exceptions. Notably, news coverage and interviews don't count.
So then, what does count?
Entertainment content. So for example, when Dr. Oz ran for Senate, he stopped making his show, in part because any station that aired it would have had to offer equal free airtime to his opponent. But there's another key limitation of this law. Notice it says equal opportunities, not actually equal time. So if a candidate buys an ad on a TV station for $1,000 in primetime, that station has to give their opponent the option to purchase an ad for the same price in primetime. But if the opponent doesn't want to buy that ad space, the station doesn't have to do anything else.
Do these rules also apply to all media, like cable TV, podcasts, or online publications?
No, this law only applies to broadcast stations, networks, and radio. So cable channels and the internet aren't affected by any of this. That means CNN, ESPN, Hulu, Facebook, none of them have to offer equal opportunities. For instance, a few months ago, Elon Musk interviewed Donald Trump on X. But under the law, he is not required to give Kamala Harris the option for a similar interview.
Understood. So that means no, political candidates are not guaranteed equal amounts of airtime. Casey Decker, thank you. Next, a lot of money has been raised this election season. Vice President Kamala Harris has reportedly raised $1 billion since entering the race. According to reporting from the New York Times, former President Trump has raised around $853 million this calendar year. We received questions about how campaign funds can be used, including whether former President Trump can use his campaign funds to pay for his legal bills. Brandon Lewis looks into what is legal under U.S. law.
Former President Trump has spent millions on legal fees to fight his recent cases. Several Verify viewers asked us whether Trump can use his campaign funds to help cover those bills. We used these sources and found the answer isn't straightforward.
The question of what's legal and illegal is not as clear as we'd like it to be. What I can say is, there are definitely ways for candidates to spend donor money on legal expenses that would not break the law.
The two main ways candidates fund their campaigns are with direct donations or money from political action committees, or PACs. The Brennan Center says almost all of Trump's legal fees are being paid with PAC money. These are funds from Trump-aligned groups like Save America or Make America Great Again Incorporated. Campaign finance law doesn't explicitly prohibit spending PAC money on personal expenses, including legal fees.
Under current law and under current guidance, Trump can use the funds from that leadership PAC to pay his legal expenses for personal matters.
The law is stricter when it comes to using campaign money. The Federal Elections Commission says candidates can only use campaign funds to cover campaign-related expenses, not personal ones. Campaign finance law spells out examples of personal expenses, but certain items like meals, travel expenses, and childcare can go either way. The FEC determines what counts as a personal expense on a case-by-case basis. This means Trump can use his campaign money for some legal bills, but only if it's directly related to his run for office. With you at Verify, I'm Brandon Lewis.
We've fact-checked the issues, and now it's time to head to the polls. Casey Decker explains why you shouldn't think something's wrong if we don't know the results at the end of Election Day.
Election Day is November 5th, but we might not know the final results until days later. That doesn't mean something went wrong. It's part of the normal election calendar. Some states take longer than others to process ballots, whether because of low staffing, rules on when they can start counting, or waiting for mailed ballots to arrive. We don't know for sure when each state will be done counting, but they do all have deadlines by which the results need to be finalized and certified. Some states require local elections offices to certify their results the day after the election. Others give them a month. Then the states usually have a few extra days to tally and certify the statewide vote. For presidential elections, federal law requires all states to certify their results by December 11th.
On behalf of our entire Verify team, including my co-host Brandon Lewis, I hope you enjoyed the show and that you learned something new today. I'm Adiante Till. Now, there's bound to be lots of misinformation leading up to the election and even in the days after. So think twice before sharing a claim that isn't verified. You might just be sharing something that's intentionally deceptive. Now, if you're unsure about a claim, just send us a text to 202-410-8808, and we'll get right to work verifying whether it's true or false. Now, if you want even more fact checks, then head on over to the Verify This YouTube page. That's where you can find bingeable fast facts, extended interviews with our experts, and lots of fact checks. And while you're there, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.
10 Tampa Bay Plus keeps you informed, prepared, and connected. So keep it here for live and on-demand information as we get closer to Election Day. I'm Frank Wiley, and thanks for joining us.